The always start strong, but then you lose momentum after a week. Trust me, you're not lazy. You just design your environment wrong. You know, our brain always wants the easiest path, seeking instant rewards by nature. That's why doom scrolling is so addictive, because it requires zero effort, but you got a massive dopamine hit. By day, I'm a product designer. My job is literally using human psychology to build apps that makes tasks feel completely effortless. This is why I also decided to apply those principles to make myself more disciplined. And it actually works. So let's get straight into it. So for the longest time since I moved to the UK, I was permanently exhausted. I had this constant heavy brain fog that I couldn't get rid of. Maybe I just haven't adapted to a new environment. But it lasted for way too long. So I consulted my GP and it turns out I was severely vitamin D deficient. Honestly, it was such a big relief. Before you try any new habits or implement any new system, you gotta figure out if your body actually have the vitamins you need and optimize your biology. Honestly, nobody in the self-development base talk about that enough, but I think it's really important. You can imagine your brain operates like a factory production line, and it requires very specific raw materials. Vitamin D and iron are the absolute baseline requirements your brains need to physically manufacture dopamine, which is the chemical for drive and motivation. And magnesium is what actually fuels the energy power plants inside your brain cells. If these levels are tanked, your system experiences a massive supply chain bottleneck. Your brain physically cannot produce the energy or the focus you need, no matter how much willpower you try to force. It just makes things so much harder. And living here in the UK, missing suns, especially in the winter, is basically a national pastime. So these deficiencies are incredibly common. But the moment I fixed my levels by taking some supplements, I felt like I switched my light back on. My energy returned and things stopped feeling so incredibly hard. Which is why lately I'm also being more consistent with my YouTube upload schedule. So before you blame your mindset, I will highly recommend you to take a vitamin test or at least speak to your doctor. Obviously, I'm just sharing my personal experience here and I'm not a medical professional. So please check in with your doctor for the best approach for you. So next, after we fix our hardware, we gotta talk about why most discipline strategies fail. It is because you are suffering by being disciplined. If your reasons for doing something is just because you should or you have to, or if you don't, something bad will happen, then you are suffering. Your brain registers that kind of obligation as threat, and it will eventually rebel against you. Behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg found that when we feel coerced into an action, our brain generates instant resistance. But when you feel like you are actually choosing it, the resistance vanishes. So after I completely changed how I talk to myself, I stopped doing anything out of anxiety. So instead of thinking I have to save money because I was so scared of being fired or things just get more and more expensive, I would say I save money because I value financial literacy and this is part of me and I want to build a secure future. And I stopped dragging myself to the gym because I thought I should, or otherwise I would be weak or I would look fat. But instead, I started going because I genuinely care about building a healthy lifestyle and I really love how it makes me feel stronger and stronger after each session. It sounds like a tiny psychological shift, but as James Clear famously said in his book, Atomic Habits, when the habits became a part of your identity, negotiation stopped. You stop thinking whether you should or should not do. You just show up because this is part of who you are. You really shouldn't feel like you're constantly suffering by being disciplined. You've got to find the fun and the things you love from it. So point 3 is pure user experience. After you got this internal drive, you need to design your environment. Your brains by default will choose whatever is most visible and accessible. So our job is to make the bad choice harder to reach, but the good choice visible and accessible. In product design, there is a concept called fixed law. It's basically proof that the closer and the bigger a button is, the easier it is to click. If a button is tiny and hidden in a submenu, users won't use it. It is super applicable in real life too. So I started friction mapping my environment to flip the designs. For example, to get better sleep, I got an Alexa to wake me up and ban my phone into the bedroom. That is why I never doom scroll before I go to sleep or the first time I wake up. And to make sure I actually execute a skincare routine, my skincare is laid out neatly in a row. I'm quite a lazy person in terms of my skincare, but now since I see everything beautifully laid out together, it just made me want to use it. And to hit my financial goals, my savings are completely automated right after I got paid, so I literally don't need to do anything after setting up once. I don't magically build superhuman power to change my habits. I just build an environment where the good choices are always the easiest option, so I can just show up. So now let's talk about how we design our schedule. And on this, I've tried both extremes and failed at both. At first, I was completely spontaneous. I just did whatever I felt at the moment. And the problem was, I would always delay the decisions until the very last minute, and then end up dropping the plan entirely to sit on my phone or binge watch Friends, which I already watched 10 times. So I went to another extremes. I was dying to succeed because I was loathing the other version of me. I overschedule. I packed my calendar with no rest. I tried to power through it, but then I burn out immediately. And I finally realized the sweet spot is to plan briefly, but match your energy. Now I just set a baseline for what I want to achieve in a week without forcing things into rigid time slots. For example, my minimum is going to the gym 4 times a week. I want to do 2 cardio sessions and 2 strength training. I will schedule intense cardio after a lighter work day when I actually have the energy to power through it. If I have a brutal breathing heavy day, I will do yoga or Pilates as my strength training so my brain can actually recover. I do the exact same thing for my content creation. To release a video every 2 weeks, I schedule just weekend day to film in between and 2 specific evenings to edit. By keeping the plan brief and realistic, I don't get overwhelmed too easily so that I can keep going. And to my surprise, I'm actually feeling quite great so far and still being consistent about doing everything. So if you want to make this work, you've got to do a really honest audit of your own week and what is the stress level of your work and what is your main priority. Once you figure out what specific tasks actually drain your energy, then stop scheduling them at a bad time. So once you order your week, the next step is how you actually design the tasks inside your schedule. And you have to be as specific as possible and break everything down into small actionable steps. Because if you just write down a massive goal, like make a video, your brain will get overwhelmed and it doesn't know what to do. And you will end up right back on your phone. So I'm going to share the exact approach I use that allowed me to pivot my career into a product designer as a self-taught designer. So back then, before the AI era, telling myself to become a product designer was completely overwhelming. So I read a book called The One Thing, which was literally just about how to remove distraction and breaking down a massive goal into small actionable steps. And the steps are really small. So instead of telling myself to study design, which I had no clue what that means, my steps were literally open my laptop, type YouTube into the URL, search for what is product design in the search bar, and play the first video that pop up on my screen. And then I do another small task, which is open WhatsApp, find my friend in the industry and say hello to them and tell them I was trying to be a product designer. And every time I finish a micro step, I get a genuine hit of accomplishment. I remember being a kid and finally get a check mark next to a chore on the fridge. That physical act of checking something off feels amazing. So I still do this exact same thing with my bullet journal. I will write down the tasks of the day, and before I sleep, I just check off the things I've done. So the thing is, stop trying to be a disciplined ninja who can power through massive mountains of work. You don't need a black belt in willpower. You just need to design a game that is easy for you. So I want to summarize everything I talked about today. So first, I would suggest you to check your vitamin level. If your hardware is only functioning in 75%, then everything else will have to work harder. And the second thing is to design your internal drive. Remember to have fun in the process because discipline shouldn't feel like suffering. And the next thing is to design your environment that can build you up for success, not set you up for failure. Then you gotta design your schedules which match your energy level. And finally, design your task to make it as small and as specific as possible. And you will see how quickly discipline just become your default setting. If you want to see how exactly I optimize my finances and save my first 100k, you can watch this video next. I wrote down 8 unsexy habits and I think you'll be interested in. Drop a comment below and don't forget to subscribe me. I'll see you there. Bye.